The Folger Shakespeare Library, a secret Baconian-Rosicrucian-Freemasonic institution. What follows is a secret history never before told about the origins of the Folger family and their links and connections to the Bacon family, and in particular Francis Bacon, at the time of the founding of what became the United States of America, during the period of the publication of the Shakespeare First Folio, the greatest secular book in the history of the world, that would later form the basis of the Folger Shakespeare Library. In her recent full-length work on the obsessively secretive Henry Clay Folger and the Folger Shakespeare Library, its author, Andrea Mays, reveals an important truth unknown to the world at large. The Folger Library maintains the culture of modesty and secrecy established by its founders. Henry Folger would call for stained glass windows, crests, floor tiles, quotations cut in stone, and symbols, including the ubiquitous Tudor rose, carved in wood. He chose every design element to communicate a specific meaning, many of them sophisticated and obscure. The symbols, images, and sayings formed a silent composition that only he and Emily could hear. Folger exercised great care in choosing them, specifying their exact spelling and punctuation, preserving archaic forms. In the realms of these secret words and signs, only a time traveller or a scholar could comprehend and decode them. The Folgers trace their colonial descent directly back to Peter Folger, translator and government official born in Norwich, England, in 1617, the son of John Folger and Mariba Gibbs. His father, John Folger, was born in 1594 in the county of Norfolk, and his wife, Mariba Gibbs, 2 miles east of the county of Norfolk, England, in 1600. Virtually nothing is known about either John and Mariba Gibbs Folger and the early years of their son Peter. There is, however, every likelihood that the Folgers knew members of the Bacon family. The twin counties of Suffolk and Norfolk of East Anglia were the political strongholds of the prominent Bacon family, whose wide and extensive private and social circles extended across the whole region. And the great scion of the family, the philosopher-poet Francis Bacon, concealed author of the Shakespeare works, successively served as the Member of Parliament for Ipswich in the county of Suffolk in 1597, 1601, 1604 and 1610. This was the period of the great expansion into North America, secretly directed by Francis Bacon and his Rosicrucian Brotherhood, that was to forever change the future direction of the modern world. In 1606, the Virginia Company was formed to organise and promote the colonisation of Virginia, and shortly after, the first permanent English-speaking settlement in North America was established at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, the seed which grew and evolved into the first modern constitutional and federal republic, the United States of America. The great American historian Alexander Brown, in the preface to his standard work, The Genesis of the United States, observes that the period between the return of the expedition of Captain Weymouth to England in July 1605, sent out by Sir Ferdinando Jorge, Thomas Arundel, Lord Wardour, and his brother-in-law Henry Wriothesley, Earl of Southampton, and the return of Dale in June 1616 constituted the most vital period in the history of the formation of the United States of America and the future direction of the world. This was the period of the first foundation. It found many Englishmen ready and resolved to secure for their country and for their religion a lot or portion in the New World. Regardless of the claims of Spain and Rome, it witnessed the granting of the first public charters in England and the planting of the first public colonies in Virginia. It saw the greatest difficulties overcome, and it closed with the irrevocable establishment of the English race on American soil. It was the crucial period of English occupancy of North America. If the enterprise had then resulted in failure, the United States would not now be in existence. It was probably through knowledge of the activities of Francis Bacon and the London Virginia Company and the first permanent English settlement in Jamestown, followed by Bermuda, Newfoundland and Massachusetts, founded by the Pilgrims transported across the Atlantic in the Mayflower in 1620, that the Folger family developed the idea of emigrating to the New World. It cannot be determined whether any of the Folger family were members of the Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood or privy to Bacon's secret of his authorship of the Shakespeare works that apparently later passed down the Folger family from generation to generation. But what is clear is that it was a secret known to the great scion of the Folger family and the leading light of the Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood, Benjamin Franklin, the great ancestor of Henry Clay Folger, founder of the Folger Shakespeare Library. The elusive John Folger and his 18-year-old son, Peter Folger, emigrated to Massachusetts in 1635. During his voyage to America on the vessel Abigail, Peter first met Mary Morrill, an indentured servant. He spent the next 9 years working as a weaver, miller, surveyor and shoemaker to raise the £20 to buy her out of her contract, and then in 1644 they were married. Father and son initially settled in Dedham and then in Watertown, Massachusetts. During the 1640s, the Folgers moved to Martha's Vineyard, now the home or destination of the rich and powerful American elites, an island located south of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Peter and Mary Folger had a daughter named Abia, who was the mother of the great writer, scientist and philosopher Benjamin Franklin, the most important Freemason of his time, one of the founding Freemasonic fathers of the United States of America and signatory to the Declaration of Independence. W.O. Stevens observes, "The characteristics of the Folgers were independence, force of character and intellect, and an amazing versatility. The Folger type of mind was inventive, mechanical and scientific. His grandson, Benjamin Franklin, was a true Folger." The period from 1757 to 1762 was spent by Benjamin Franklin in England, where he lodged with his son William at 7 Craven Street in London. In 1756, Franklin was elected a Fellow of the Baconian-Rosicrucian-Freemasonic Royal Society. Inspired by Bacon, brought out the shadows of its Baconian-Rosicrucian origins by his disciples at London a century earlier. In 1760, Franklin was elected to the Council of the Royal Society. Towards the end of the year, it is recorded in the minute book that Franklin was present at the Grand Lodge of England, held at the Crown and Anchor, London, 17th of November 1760. The year before, he was present at the Lodge St David at Edinburgh in Scotland, as well as receiving the degree of LL.D. at St Andrews University and Freedom of the City of Edinburgh. His Masonic authority, de La Fontaine, remarks that it is interesting to note that during his stay in London in 1757, Franklin made special efforts in making the acquaintance of David Garrick, the greatest Shakespearean actor of the age. Garrick, who was then in the meridian of his power and fame, greatly attracted Franklin. It was Freemason David Garrick who organised the Grand Shakespeare Jubilee of 1769, which put Stratford-upon-Avon, home of William Shakespeare, as the full centre of the Shakespeare world on the map, a Rosicrucian Freemasonic ludibrium that still fools and deceives nearly all and sundry around the Shakespearean globe to the present day. Franklin was equally keen to seek out the company of Dr. Samuel Johnson, the editor of the 8-volume 1765 edition of the Shakespeare works, also filled with Baconian Rosicrucian ciphers. Franklin regularly met his fellow Freemasons Garrick and Dr. Johnson and kept up a correspondence with both of them for many years after. When he returned home to Philadelphia in 1785, Franklin held a position equal to his fellow Freemason George Washington as the hero of American independence. He was the only statesman to sign all three fundamental documents of US independence: the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, finally ending the War of American Revolution, and the United States Constitution, the documents that established the national frame of government for the United States of America. On the 17th of April, 1790, the great Benjamin Franklin died at his home in Philadelphia, and the whole of the First Federal Republic of the modern world went into mourning. In homage to his great ancestor Benjamin Franklin, the originator of the magnificent and unique Folger Shakespeare Library, Henry Clay Folger, maintained that had he not collected Shakespeareana, he would have collected Frankliniana. The founding father of the Folger Shakespeare Library, Henry Clay Folger, was born in New York City on the 18th of June 1857, the eldest son of Henry Clay Folger of Nantucket, Massachusetts, and Eliza Jane Folger, descended on his father's side from Peter Folger, whose daughter Abia was the mother of the leading Freemason and founding father of the United States, Benjamin Folger Franklin. From his young school days in New York, Henry Clay Folger showed early academic acumen and a wide interest in classical and modern literature. In 1875, he entered the prestigious Amherst College, Massachusetts, and for a Christmas present in his freshman year, his brother gifted him a single-volume edition of Shakespeare's complete works, which still survives full of quotations about our immortal poet by some of Folger's contemporaries, among them the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, and especially Ralph Waldo Emerson, filled in by Folger over a period of many years. In his junior year at Amherst College, Folger was elected to the Phi Beta Kappa, the oldest academic society in the United States of America. In Bacon's New Atlantis, in their great college of Solomon's House, Solomon's Temple, the central founding myth of the Freemasonry Brotherhood, its divine Rosicrucian philosopher-scientists pursue research in all the arts and sciences for the future benefit of humankind. In similar vein, the aims of Phi Beta Kappa is to promote and advance excellence in the liberal arts and sciences and induct the most accomplished students of the arts and sciences from elite American colleges and universities. The fraternity of Phi Beta Kappa was founded at the College of William and Mary in 1776 and was the alma mater of several early American presidents. Thomas Jefferson, whose hero was Lord Bacon, James Monroe, who received the entered apprentice degree in Williamsburg, Lodge No. 6, while a student at the College of William and Mary, and most likely received his second and third degrees at St. John's Lodge, and John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States. This earned the College of William and Mary the moniker, the alma mater of the nation. Folger's ancestor and Freemason Benjamin Franklin received William and Mary's first honorary degree in 1756, and his brother George Washington, the most famous Freemason in American history, became its first American Chancellor in 1788. All through its glorious history, innumerable members of Phi Beta Kappa have continued to go on to become Freemasons. On graduating from Amherst in 1879, Phi Beta Kappa Henry Clay Folger joined Charles Pratt and Company, aligned with Standard Oil, while pursuing a law degree at Columbia University. He received his law degree in 1881 and was admitted to the New York bar, but never practiced as an attorney. During these years, he met his future wife, Emily Clara Jordan, a graduate from Vassar College, and the two of them later married in 1885. She too came from a distinguished American family. Her father, Edward W. Jordan, a newspaper editor and lawyer, was the solicitor of the US Treasury under President Abraham Lincoln, who many believe was a Freemason, and Vice President Andrew Johnson, who was a Freemason. Vice President Johnson replaced his predecessor Lincoln as the 17th President of the United States in 1865. He was initiated in the Greenville Lodge, Tennessee, and from 1867 received the 4th through to the 32nd degrees of the Scottish Rite, thereby becoming the first president to receive the Scottish Rite degrees. At the time, the Jordan family lived in Washington, and her father Edward once took Emily to meet President Lincoln at the White House. Her brother Francis was named after the philosopher-poet Francis Bacon, concealed author of the Shakespeare works. In 1875, Emily entered Vassar College, winning a Phi Beta Kappa golden key engraved with the letters SP, the initials of the Latin word Societas Philosophiae, and on the other side the Greek letters PBK for Phi Beta Kappa, meaning love of wisdom is the guide of life. A pointing finger symbolises the ambition of its members to attain the principles of friendship, morality and learning, which are represented by 3 stars. 3 letters and 3 stars, a possible allusion to the number 33, which is Bacon in simple cipher. On the 6th of October 1885, Henry and Emily were married in the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Elizabeth, New Jersey. It was a match made in Shakespearean heaven. His new bride Emily shared her husband's passion for Shakespeare, and in the following years the two of them conceived and developed a far-reaching idea that would lead all the way to the magnificent Folger Shakespeare Library. Around the time of their marriage, the Folgers purchased a copy of the Halliwell Phillips facsimile edition of the First Folio, which became the cornerstone of their Shakespeare collection and future library. In 1889, Henry made his first appearance in an auction house and purchased a copy of an original Shakespeare Fourth Folio for $107. It served as another noteworthy milestone on the road to the great purchases to come. In 1897, they purchased their first major collection in the form of the outstanding Shakespeare Library, originally belonging to 19th century Shakespeare scholar Halliwell Phillips. The collection had previously been sold to the Earl of Warwick in the 1850s. The complex negotiations and purchase of this collection was conducted in strict secrecy, with the use of codes to conceal information from possible prying eyes. Utmost secrecy surrounded a flurry of correspondence, which Folger signed with the code name Golfer. His messages used other coded terms: Reboro, telegram received; Obsono, offer is accepted; Aspico, commission will be allowed of. Its purchaser, Henry Folger, a keeper of secrets, was a secretive man by nature and carried out most of his important purchases in secret, often with his identity concealed behind trusted book dealers and other intermediaries who maintained his anonymity with the major auction houses and individuals. During the decades leading up to the opening of the Folger Shakespeare Library, the Folgers, usually in secret, were continually adding to their collection of first, second, third and fourth Shakespeare folios, steadily gathering together the largest collection of Shakespeare folios in the world. Sometime in the second decade of the 20th century, Henry and Emily Folger began thinking about and planning for a library to house their enormous collection of Shakespeareana, all hidden away in secret New York warehouses whose contents were virtually unknown to the rest of the Shakespeare world. Folger said, "I finally concluded I would give it to Washington, for I am an American." The only question was how to proceed, and Henry Folger did so the only way he knew how, with the same modus operandi that characterised his whole life, in secret. Henry Folger acquired the property for his Shakespeare Library through patience, secrecy and subterfuge. In 1918, the Folgers visited Washington, D.C., providing them with the opportunity to look around the Jefferson Building of the Library of Congress, over the street from the Capitol, the seat of the United States Congress, the legislative branch of the U.S. federal government. It would be here in the very heart of the Capitol Hill district on East Capitol Street, the Folgers decided to build the Folger Shakespeare Library, across from the Library of Congress, raised phoenix-like on 6,487 volumes, Thomas Jefferson's personal library, then the largest private library in America. A man of great learning with a reputation as a universal scholar, Thomas Jefferson possessed a magnificent library for which he drew up a catalogue arranged by subject matter rather than alphabetically. He found a basis for his system in Lord Bacon's Table of Sciences. Following the division of the faculties of the mind into memory, reason and imagination, he classified his books under the corresponding headings of history, philosophy and the fine arts. The Folgers spent the next 9 years purchasing 14 houses that occupied the block of East Capitol Street, known as Grant's Row, concealed behind lawyers, advisors and estate agents to maintain secrecy and anonymity. In fact, so secret was this process that the names of Henry and Emily Folger appeared on no official document connected with the home sales. He would buy the parcels in secret. Front men acting on his behalf would negotiate with the owners and buy all the land. Only then, once he controlled the whole block, would Folger reveal his plan. In early May 1928, the House of Representatives and the Senate unanimously passed a bill securing the location of the Folger Shakespeare Library. On the 21st of May, President Coolidge signed the bill into law, which allowed the Library of Congress to acquire the southern half of square number 760 and all of square number 761, for the annex with the northern half of square 760 allocated for the Folgers project of a Shakespeare Library, just across from the future Supreme Court, the highest arbiter of law and jurisprudence based on the Anglo-American tradition ultimately derived from Bacon and his writings on law. The biographer of the Folgers makes the pregnant statement: "It is more than serendipitous that the two libraries sit across from one another within sight of the Capitol." The founder of the Folger Shakespeare Library, Henry Folger, was very familiar with the secret concealed life and writings of the founder of the Rosicrucian-Freemasonry Brotherhood, Francis Bacon, and founding father of the United States of America. The whole Shakespeare world knows that Henry Folger obsessively collected all things Shakespearean, but what is not widely known is that he also obsessively collected the largest collection of Baconiana ever assembled under one roof. He was fully aware of the Bacon-Shakespeare controversy, and he and his wife Emily, whose brother Francis was named after Bacon, were widely read and well versed in the subject. The two of them were members of the American Francis Bacon Society. Folger always intended to allot Sir Francis Bacon a prominent place in his library, given his important contribution to English literature and thought. Rosenbach called the Folger collection of Baconiana the most extensive ever gathered. Henry became a member of the Bacon Society of America at its creation in 1923. The subject of Bacon's authorship of the Shakespeare works formed a prominent part of the Folger collection. It was a permanent reminder of the Rosicrucian ludibrium that the illiterate, semi-illiterate William Shakespeare was the author of the Shakespeare poems and plays, the greatest literature known to humankind. An illusion maintained in public by institutions, prestigious university presses, major publishing houses, as well as the international media, by well-placed professors, journalists and others who knew better in private or secret, who had sworn affiliations to an invisible Rosicrucian Freemasonic Brotherhood. who adopted a position in public which they knew to be untrue in private, bound by a higher truth and allegiance to maintain an illusion that, as Bacon articulated around the emblem on the title page of his New Atlantis, in time the hidden truth will be revealed. When Henry Folger was alive, that time had not yet arrived. The year before he died, Folger wrote to his British book dealer, "I am coming towards the end of my interest in Bacon, for all the books I have seen read by him tend to prove that he could not have been in any way responsible for the Shakespeare plays." Henry Folger, founder and public face of the Folger Shakespeare Library, was, however, more than capable of keeping secrets, maintaining appearances, and serving as a front for a company or institution. While working for Standard Oil, he willingly served as a front for his company in connection with an investment the company itself could not legally make. Perhaps not too dissimilar to William Shakespeare acting as a front for Lord Bacon as the author of the Shakespeare works. In a lawsuit relating to the activities of Standard Oil, Folger himself actually testified he was a mere front, and as part of the proceedings he made a statement that was not believed, in a long legal process that in the end was an elaborate charade, in which Folger played a leading and prominent role. In his full-length standard work collecting Shakespeare, The Story of Henry and Emily Folger, Stephen Grant informs us, "He took part, showing that he could become a key and willing player in a high-stakes business on the margins of the law. Folger had a shadowy duality. He maintained his shy, respected place in the firm, while loyally allowing himself to walk on the dark side to foster and protect Rockefeller's Texas interests." The founder of the Folger Shakespeare Library was notoriously secretive, so much so that the secretiveness of warranted its own entry on the index of the Millionaire and the Bard. His secrecy was not only obsessive, it bordered on the paranoia. Like Bacon before him, if for different reasons, Folger sought to maintain his anonymity, to keep among other things his name out of the media, and throughout his life, secrecy became one of his signature traits. His reflexive compulsion for secrecy was an integral part of his secret life and character, and again, not dissimilar to Bacon, for almost 40 years he led a double life, one in private, secret, and another in public. His compulsive secrecy had started early as part of his Phi Beta Kappa, a secret society many of whose members went on to become senior Freemasons. One of his former classmates said of him, "Henry Clay Folger was a shy, taciturn Phi Beta Kappa who lived by 3 rules: never tell what you've done, what you are doing, or what you are going to do." The kind of welcome qualities characteristic of a secret and invisible member of Bacon's Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood. The founder of the Folger Shakespeare Library knew Bacon's writings intimately and no doubt pored over his essay of simulation and dissimulation to the point that he knew off by heart what could be taken as a Rosicrucian Freemasonic manifesto by which Henry Clay Folger lived his whole life. For if a man have that penetration of judgment as he can discern what things are to be laid open and what to be secreted, and what to be showed at half-lights, and to whom and when, there be 3 degrees of this hiding and veiling of a man's self. For the first of these, secrecy. Mysteries are due to secrecy, therefore set it down, that a habit of secrecy is both politic and moral. For the second, which is dissimulation, it followeth many times upon secrecy by a necessity, so he that will be secret must be a dissembler in some degree. But for the third degree, which is simulation and false profession, that I hold more culpable and less politic, except it be in great and rare matters. The Folger Shakespeare Library is located on 1733 16th Street, close to the Supreme Council, Mother Council of the World, of the 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The emblem of the Supreme Mother Council of the world is a double-headed eagle, above which rests a crown with, at its peak, a triangle residing within it. The number 33, simple cipher for Bacon. The Folgers worked hand in glove with the architects every step of the way, down to the absolute minute details of every single aspect of its design and build of the Folger Shakespeare Library. In The Millionaire and the Bard, its author Andrea Mays tells us, the library would become two different buildings, one concealed within the other. Henry and Emily wanted the library's interior to mesmerise visitors with words, signs and symbols. Emily wrote that they intended the library to represent the First Folio illustrated. Thus, Henry would call for stained glass windows, crests, floor tiles, quotations cut in stone, and symbols including the ubiquitous Tudor rose carved in wood. He chose every design element to communicate a specific meaning, many of them sophisticated and obscure. The symbols, images and sayings formed a silent composition that only he and Emily could hear. In balance, they created a harmonic resonance that conjured up the spirit of Shakespeare's England. Folger exercised great care in choosing them, specifying their exact spelling and punctuation, preserving archaic forms. In the realm of these secret words and signs, only a time traveller or a scholar could comprehend and decode them. But Andrea Mays did not provide an interpretation or explanation that would shed light on or explain the meaning of all the secret, arcane and obscure signs, images, symbols, specially selected quotations and the ubiquitous so-called Tudor rose that all form part of the silent composition encoded into the Folger Shakespeare Library. No one has ever hitherto been able to comprehend, decipher and decode them. Let us then take a look at this complex Baconian-Rosicrucian cryptogram, which reveals many of the secrets of the Folger Shakespeare Library and the secret known to Henry and Emily Folger of the true authorship of the Shakespeare works. In the planned garden of the west side of the library, the Folgers requested that a marble statue be embowered in shrubbery, overlook a fountain and portray Puck, gesturing with the caption with its simple immortal line, "Lord, what fools these mortals be," a coded message to the Shakespeare academics and ordinary schoolmen who have never yet had the required wit to decipher it. Both Grant and Mays point out that the angle of Puck's gaze is towards the Library of Congress, founded or refounded on Thomas Jefferson's personal library, originally based on Bacon's organisation of knowledge, memory, reason and imagination. The angle of Puck, with its associated immortal caption, "Lord, what fools these mortals be," gazing towards the Library of Congress, sends a cryptic message to the deceived and deluded fools who believe the illiterate Shakespeare of Stratford was the author of the greatest literature known to humankind, that Bacon is Shakespeare. As part of the secret complex cryptogram carefully designed by the Folgers, which in many respects forms the key occult theme of the Folger Shakespeare Library, with its arcane symbols, images and allegories, shrouded in mystery, the very language of Lord Bacon's Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood, described in its own rituals as a profound system of morality, veiled in allegories and illustrated symbols, there is a large stained glass window set in the west wall of the reading room. It depicts the passage from Jack's, who has been identified with Bacon, 7 Ages of Man speech from As You Like It, which begins with the heavily pregnant and immortal lines conveying that universal truth: all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. In the centre of the east wall, the Folgers had a replica of the Shakespeare memorial bust overlooking the grave of William Shakespeare, mounted in the Holy Trinity Church at Stratford-upon-Avon, which gazes across the room to the stained glass window of the 7 Ages of Man. To the present day, no one knows just who was responsible for placing the Stratford bust at Stratford sometime before 1623, determined by the publication of the Shakespeare First Folio. Well, this is what is said in orthodox accounts of William Shakespeare. But both Henry and Emily Folger, avid readers of Baconian literature, would have known Baconian scholars and cryptologists have for a very long time presented evidence or reasons indicating that it was placed there by Bacon and his Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood. Few knew any better than Henry Folger that all the world's a stage and the men and women merely players. He himself had lived a double life, served as a front and had a shadowy duality, and was part of a secret society. All his life Folger had played one role in private and another role in public. On the Shakespeare stage, extending to the four corners of the globe, he and his wife Emily played their parts exceedingly well. A grand performance that Bacon, founder of the Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood, would surely have been impressed with. The arcane message of placing a replica of the Shakespeare memorial bust looking out at the magnificent stained glass window depicting the All's the World's a Stage and all the men and women merely players scene from As You Like It is that Shakespeare of Stratford was playing a role and was merely a literary front for the true author of the Shakespeare poems and plays, Lord Bacon. The ubiquitous Tudor rose conceals another part of the secret of the silent composition in the arcane cryptogram of the Folger Shakespeare Library. The word Rosicrucian is derived from rose cross, and Christian Rosenkreuz of the chemical wedding adorns a red cross and roses as symbols of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. The secret invisible order is frequently referred to as the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, and the title page of several Rosicrucian publications depict the symbols of the rose. The rose has an ancient history as a symbol of secrecy, and the phrase sub rosa means to communicate or done in secret. If we look at the monument of Francis Bacon at St Michael's Church, Gorhambury, we see that his feet are sporting a matching pair of Rosicrucian roses, befitting of the founder of the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, and the ubiquitous Rosicrucian rose in the Folger Shakespeare Library denotes that it is a Rosicrucian temple devoted to Francis Bacon, Grand Master of the Rosicrucians and the secret concealed author of the Shakespeare works. After the cornerstone of this Rosicrucian temple of Baconian learning had been laid in May 1930, Henry Clay Folger entered St John's Hospital in Brooklyn for what was believed to be a routine operation for an enlarged prostate. While confined to his bed recuperating and recovering, Folger, in characteristic fashion, was still conveying orders and directives concerning the construction and design of the library. But things took a turn for the worse, and 3 weeks after the first operation, his medical team informed him that he required a second operation, which proved unsuccessful. On the 11th of June 1930, the great collector of Shakespeareana, Henry Clay Folger, unfortunately died without deservedly seeing his lifetime project completed. His funeral took place 2 days later on the 13th of June in the chapel of the Central Congregational Church on Hancock Street, where Henry had been a worshipper, trustee and owner, near Franklin Avenue, named after his ancestor, Benjamin Franklin, the leading Freemason of his time. The great statesman would doubtless have been proud of him for the Baconian Shakespearean shrine he left to the American people. His grieving lifetime companion Emily did not bury him. His remains were cremated, and in keeping with his wishes, his ashes now lie in a mortuary urn in the wood-panelled reading room in the Folger Shakespeare Library, beneath the replica of the Stratford Shakespeare monument installed by Lord Bacon and his Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood. The urn of Henry Clay Folger is concealed behind a bronze tablet on which is engraved, "To the glory of William Shakespeare and the greater glory of God," comprising 53 letters, an occult number in Baconian-Rosicrucian Freemasonic circles, denoting the letters SOW in simple cipher, standing for Sons of Wisdom, or members of Bacon's Rosicrucian Freemasonry Brotherhood. The funeral service and eulogy was delivered by its pastor and Henry Folger's close friend, Reverend Samuel Parks Cadman. The English-born Reverend Cadman was a great liberal Protestant clergyman, newspaper writer, author of numerous books and pioneer Christian radio broadcaster of the 1920s and 1930s, and from 1924 to 1928, the President of the Federal Council of the Churches of Christ in America. His true impact upon his times and humanity was enormous. It has been said that in his generation, no man exerted more influence for the brotherhood of man. He was also a member of the independent Royal Arch Lodge No. 2, New York City, and Grand Chaplain of the Grand Lodge of New York for 28 years. In his eulogy, the Reverend Cadman said that Mr. Folger was a singular mild man. He kept a steady silence, which was more eloquent than speech. I do not recall a single instance when an unkind word left his lips. His life was marked by self-discipline and poise. The library finally officially opened on the 23rd of April 1932, supposedly the 368th birthday of William Shakespeare, on the date 23rd of April that he is said to have died in 1616. It is of course well known that the 23rd of April is St George's Day, although it is less well known that the patron saint, invariably portrayed with a red cross very similar to the red cross of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, is the saint after whom many early Freemasons named their lodges. The special opening ceremony attracted a list of distinguished guests from around the world, among them ambassadors from Great Britain, Germany and France, various members of Congress, justices of the US Supreme Court and dignitaries from US colleges and universities. And, with good reason, the British Ambassador to the United States, Sir Ronald Lindsay, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St Michael and St George, was invited to participate in the opening of the Rosicrucian Temple or Shrine to Bacon Shakespeare. He was the fifth son of James Lindsay, 26th Earl of Crawford, whose ancestor David Lindsay, First Lord Lindsay of Balcarres, was a contemporary of Bacon and owner of the earliest known English manuscript version of the two Rosicrucian manifestos, the Fama Fraternitatis and Confessio Fraternitatis, first published anonymously at Kassel in Germany in 1614 and 1615. This manuscript containing the Fama and Confessio dates at least as early as 1633 and maybe even earlier. It shares many similarities with the Thomas Vaughan text, the English version of the Fame and Confession, that first saw print in 1652, which cryptically revealed Bacon's authorship on its title page. Both the Lindsay and Vaughan texts most likely independently derive from a common ancestor via a copy of the original manuscript of the Rosicrucian manifestos, directly or indirectly from their anonymous author, Lord Bacon. The Folger Shakespeare Library's Director of Research, Dr. Joseph Quincy Adams, delivered the first Shakespeare birthday lecture entitled Shakespeare and American Culture, in which he placed the importance of the Folger Shakespeare Library on a par with the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. In its capital city, a nation is accustomed to rear monuments to those persons who most have contributed to its well-being. Amid Washington, D.C., three stand out conspicuous above the rest: the memorials to Washington, Lincoln, and Shakespeare. They stand out as a symbol of the three great personal forces that have moulded the political, the spiritual, and the intellectual life of our nation. In locating the Folger Shakespeare Library near Capitol Hill, the White House and the magnificent Freemasonic temple of the Supreme Council 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, the sublime incomparable philosopher-poet Bacon Shakespeare, the secret founding father of the United States of America and his Rosicrucian Freemasonic Brotherhood, will forever secretly watch over its capital, Washington, D.C., the most powerful capital in all the English-speaking world.